A record $1.4 trillion has just flowed into the stock markets on day one of Donald Trump being elected. And I think Bitcoin is ready to absolutely explode, okay? If history repeats, we can see that some pretty wonky things are coming down the line for Bitcoin. We can see that the bull run has just begun. And today, I want to talk about why retail interest in Bitcoin is just beginning to pick up now, and why you need to be paying attention to the next 6 months and potentially the next 12 months, because this is historically when Bitcoin really begins its bull run, and nobody is ready for when Bitcoin absolutely explodes. So before we start talking about the stock market, let's look at retail interest beginning to pick up in Bitcoin. Now, again, I know this is not a parabolic chart. This isn't crazy. This isn't, it's nothing to really write home about. Okay, when we really zoom out and add a little bit of perspective, you might begin to see what I'm talking about. Look at this chart just beginning to pick up just a little bit. Okay, we've been telling you guys for a very long time, retail will be late. Retail will only begin buying Bitcoin when it is, say it, 70,000, 80,000 or above its previous all-time high. We can see very clearly this is what has happened. Right now, interest for Bitcoin is still relatively low. I'm on a 5-year chart here. If I zoom out a little bit further, you're going to be able to see that we are nowhere near 2017 bull run interest for Bitcoin. But what we are seeing is a little bit of interest increase. Okay, it's hard to deny that. Okay, now something else that's, let's say, a little bit more of a leading indicator is obviously watching what Coinbase is doing. Okay, so again, for those who don't know, Coinbase has hundreds of millions of users themselves. They have over 100 million users last time I checked. They're the biggest exchange in America. You can use them worldwide. And we can see that interest, or let's say the downloads of Coinbase, are exploding right now. More and more retail speculators are downloading Coinbase, and I believe the exact figures was that last week, Coinbase was ranked something like number 400 on the App Store. So they were the 400th most popular application being downloaded last week. This week, I believe they're at around 115th. So again, they have jumped 300 ranking points just this week. Okay, now again, what happened this week? Of course, you guys are going to love when I pull this up. Of course, we're going to be having a look at the chart of Bitcoin. Have a look at that big green candle. And be careful with what I say here. I need to rein myself in just a little bit. That's a big green candle. That's what that is. Bitcoin's absolutely exploded. Depending upon what country you're living in, you may or may not have seen a God candle for Bitcoin. I know my Australian friends saw a God candle. I know that my American friends didn't quite see that. We did see about a $7,000 candle though, which is pretty big. Have a look at what we're cooking with right here. Bitcoin has, as we've been documenting and following for a long time, again, we don't really pay that much attention to the price, but we told you, just be prepared for when Bitcoin breaks out of this consolidation. Things are going to move really quickly. Okay, and that's exactly what's happening. Things are moving very quickly. Bitcoin's pumped from 66K to 76K in a week. So that's not quite a God candle, because to see it a God candle, you need to see $10,000 move on the daily candle. We've seen it on the weekly. And again, in Australia yesterday, I believe we saw a 13,000 Australian cuckbuck candle, okay? So we're getting close to that territory where things are moving really quickly. Now, why? That kind of brings us back to the beginning of where we started today's video. And that is talking a little bit more about traditional markets. I have a lot more Bitcoin data I want to show you guys. A ton more Bitcoin data I want to show you guys. But first, let's look at what's actually happening in the markets. Okay, traditional markets, they run the show. You guys know that the US equity markets combined is something like 80 to 90 trillion dollars worth of value. It's a lot of market. That's a lot of value, okay? And we can see that a ton of money flowed into these markets after Trump got elected. So we can see here, market today, Wall Street hits record as Trump wins. And we also have that Federal Reserve decision coming up. We're going to talk a little bit more about that Federal Reserve decision in a moment here, okay? But let's look at some numbers. So I showed you guys some charts of what exactly is going on with Bitcoin. Let's see what the other markets are doing, because there's another couple of indicators I want to show you guys. Typically, whenever the Russell, this is a small cap index, this is like small businesses. That's what this stock market is measuring. Again, I'm going to zoom in, have a look at the candle it put in yesterday, breaking out to, we're going to call that 3-year highs. It's about to take out its all-time high. But whenever this thing has accelerated and pumped, Bitcoin has also aggressively rallied. Okay, that's just something else to keep an eye on. Let's also, let's check in on the S&P 500. Let's see what that's doing. Because again, the S&P 500 is the biggest index in America. We do need to be paying close attention to what is happening in those big indices. While we wait for that chart to load, I've got another headline I want to throw at you guys. ETF flows hit all-time high post-election. Now, again, this is just looking at ETFs, not the overall market, but the ETFs alone took in $22 billion on Wednesday after Donald Trump was elected. Think about that for a moment. $22 billion in a day. The Bitcoin ETFs have been one of the most successful ETFs in history. And from memory, I think we're somewhere around that $20 to $30 billion of total inflows, okay? The total US equity market, all of the ETFs yesterday saw that amount of inflows in a day, okay? So to kind of put that into context, that's a big number. I know we're used to people just printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars these days. And 22 billion might not sound like the biggest number getting around, but for a daily inflow, this did break records. Okay, it really did shake things up in a pretty big way, in a really big way. Okay, this is why I think we're going to see significant tailwinds for Bitcoin over the next, 6 months here. The macroeconomic environment could not be better for Bitcoin. Right now, we have people on CNBC literally talking about Bitcoin going to $100,000. I'm not going to play the video for you guys because you guys know that my Twitter videos just simply don't work, but they have some really nice charts. They're showing how aggressive the Bitcoin miners are pumping. They're saying Bitcoin's headed to 100K before the end of the year. Again, let's rein ourselves in that here. That's a big rally before the end of the year. But right now, we are, at the time of recording, we're actually at high, which is crazy. Okay, it's pretty crazy that we're at an all-time high so quickly. I hope that audio is not playing for you guys, but I want to show you guys how much money Germany has lost, because I saw this pretty interesting tweet. And I actually want to finish with a couple of really interesting tweets. One of those being, maybe let's say, looking at how prior cycles compared to this cycle. Because every single time Bitcoin breaks out after a long consolidation period, things get really interesting. We're going to get to that in a moment. I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I want to actually check out Germany first. Because I think what Germany has done is going to be a lesson for nation states all around the world. Germany has paper-handed their Bitcoin, and as this tweet lays out right here, they've lost nearly $1 billion since they sold their Bitcoin, which is ridiculous, okay? That's the number one rule of Bitcoin. You never, ever sell your Bitcoin, okay? Germany failed grade 11 maths. They're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of debt. Their economy is in the toilet. They're denuclearizing their economy. I just made up a word there. What they're doing is they're shutting down the nuclear energy plants, okay? They're deindustrializing their economy. That's the word I was searching for, okay? Germany is a mess. And their recent decision to sell 50,000 Bitcoin, it's nothing new. The country is really struggling. And I love this tweet here. It lines out that they lost, so far, $990 million. That's a lot of money. For a country to lose $990 million of money, that's a bonkers amount of money, okay? But again, this should tell you, first rule of Bitcoin, you never sell your Bitcoin. Second rule of Bitcoin, never sell your Bitcoin when Bitcoin's crashing, because that's what Germany did. Germany sold when Bitcoin was crashing. Obviously, I think this all goes back to education. People simply do not understand what they own. Okay, a lot of people just think of Bitcoin as this stock that's really volatile, goes up and down. It's like a risky tech stock. This is what a lot of TradFi thinks of Bitcoin. They don't understand the importance of Bitcoin. Okay, again, if you are new here, encourage you, spend 10 hours learning about Bitcoin, even 5 hours. I haven't met someone, sorry, who I've, convinced to spend 5 hours investigating Bitcoin, who've said, yeah, you know what? Not really that interesting, Luke. Poor recommendation. I'm not going to look into that again. Typically, if I send someone 5 hours worth of material that I kind of hand pick and hand select, I've built up this little Bitcoin beginners package over the years of trying to orange pill my friends and family. But once I send that little beginner package to the newly interested and curious person, typically they're going to come back with questions. If they actually consume the content I sent to them, they're going to look into it. Okay. And again, I think this is one of the biggest problems around the world today. The typical person, from memory, I filmed a video on this just last week, but from memory, the typical person spends 75,000 hours working in their life. Is that right? Maybe the number's higher than that. I think it's a lot of hours anyway. And again, the point of this is, how many hours do you think the average person spends thinking about how to keep their money? They might spend 70,000 hours trying to earn their money. How long do they spend actually trying to understand what they're earning? Nobody understands money. Okay, it's the biggest problem around the world today. Okay, so if you do know someone who's maybe new to Bitcoin, or you're trying to set them up with buying some Bitcoin, we would again like to recommend a good location for them to buy their Bitcoin. Of course, we recommend everything that Rhino Bitcoin is doing. We think they're one of the easiest places for you to buy and sell Bitcoin. You can also use the Lightning Network with Rhino, which is really cool. They also, as you guys can see, have one of the best user interfaces in the entire space. They have a very easy to use UX. We know that that's incredibly important for a new person to Bitcoin. So if you do have someone who's new to Bitcoin, if you're just simply, looking for somewhere else to use, and you're looking for another Bitcoin only trusted application to buy and sell your Bitcoin, and even do some cool things like borrow against your Bitcoin in the future, we recommend you check out what Rhino is doing. You can find the link in the description of today's show. Now let's talk a little bit more about not only Germany, but a couple of the very interesting things I've got planned for you guys, because I think right now Bitcoin is breaking out. And we can see every single time Bitcoin breaks out of one of these long consolidation periods, it typically does this in the year of the halving. So on the left-hand side, I have a little line drawn here, and you can see that when Bitcoin broke above about $1,200 in October 2016. So that was about 6 months after the halving. You can see what Bitcoin did next. Bitcoin rallied from about $1,200 to $20,000 in a matter of 9 months. It was really quick. Okay, once it breaks out, it explodes. And have a look, something else I want to point your attention to with this chart here on the left-hand side, we can see that Bitcoin wasn't at an all-time high when it broke out of that consolidation period. Just keep that in mind for the next thing I want to show you. Okay, before we get there, let's have a look at what happened in 2020. So the Bitcoin halving happened in 2020. Bitcoin broke out. Again, I have one of those funny lines drawn on a chart here. I hope you guys can see it. We're looking at the one in the middle here. And after Bitcoin was consolidating and trending down for 3 years, in November 2020, Bitcoin broke out and it rallied explosively from about $10,000 to $65,000. And again, a matter of months, it was about 6 to 7 months, we saw this explosive bull market. So we saw a massive rally over 6 to 7 months in 2020. We saw the same huge rally from 1,200 to 20K over what's about 9 months in 2016. And now, what's the next 6 or 9 months going to hold for Bitcoin now? I don't know, but again, history doesn't repeat, but it does often rhyme. So I think the only thing, or again, nobody knows anything for sure, but maybe one thing we could feel a little bit confident in is maybe we're due for a big rally. Maybe we're due for an explosive 6 to 9 month face melting rally. Again, I showed you guys the data earlier. Retail is not here. When retail arrives, they arrive in mass and they're going to push that price up pretty high. So that's kind of what's the same, so to say. But what's different this time? Let's have a look. Notice how that third line on the chart I have drawn over here on the right-hand side, the top right-hand side of this chart, it's not quite on the same angle as the first two, right? And that's because Bitcoin, it is a halving year. And Bitcoin is about 6 months after the halving, like it was in 2016 and 2020, before we saw those explosive rallies. But Bitcoin right now is at an all-time high. It's actually far ahead of schedule when you compare the price of where Bitcoin is today compared to its prior halvings. Typically, like Bitcoin doesn't hit an all-time high until much after its halving, but we did that before the halving this year, which is interesting. And you know what they say, the longer the consolidation period, the bigger the explosive rally. Now, Bitcoin's been consolidating here at an all-time high for about 8 months. That's 8. Yes, it's 8. Okay. What are we going to see next? I don't know. Again, nothing you see on this channel is financial advice. Personally, I think we're going to see a pretty big explosive rally. And I don't think it's going to be over in 1 or 2 months' time. Again, a very likely scenario is Bitcoin's probably going to hit 100K and it's probably going to have a big correction, 20, 30% correction. That would be natural. If Bitcoin pumps from 75K to 100K pretty rapidly, 20% correction, completely normal. I think a lot of people will think Bitcoin's top then. I don't think so. Again, just guessing, just speculating, but we've been consolidating here for about 8 to 9 months here. Really feels like the next move in Bitcoin could be a big one to the upside, a really big one. And again, I'd like to remind you as well, something that's slightly different right now is we're not at an all-time high. If you adjust for inflation, the real Bitcoin all-time high is actually at $80,777. Okay? So again, a lot of people are celebrating. They're rejoicing. We're at an all-time high. Don't forget inflation. We've had a lot of inflation since 2021. Something else we need to keep in mind about this cycle. So with all that said, guys, there's a few things that are different this cycle. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we are paying attention to and why we think we're seeing a little bit of FOMO from the billionaires, you will enjoy the recent video we filmed on this topic, looking at the record inflows and the supply suffocation. After this live stream's finished, I'm going to put a link to that video somewhere up around over there. And with all that said, guys, I've got a massage in literally 3 minutes. I'm not lying to you guys. And I haven't even had a shower yet after going to the gym. So I've got to run. I've got to have a rapido ducha. That is fast shower in Spanish. I'm going to love you guys. I'm going to leave you guys here. See you guys in the next live stream. Enjoy the rest of your